This video is brought to you by Exodus 90. More from them later in the show. So, Dr. David Wood, I'm really excited for this. Thanks for doing this.
Yep, glad to be here.
Yeah. So, I'm not really a spicy personality, although maybe some of my Canadian co-patriots would disagree with that. But I don't think...
Wait, you're Canadian?
Yes, I am. I'm sorry. Well, that's the first thing a Canadian would say. I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. Did you not know that? Okay.
I would not have done this if I had known.
I'm sorry.
I was betraying my country.
It's okay. Do you know many Canadians? Is this a new experience for you?
No, I know a few. I actually, when I was growing up in the 80s, and I used to watch a show called You Can't Do That on Television. And
oh yeah,
I was watching it, and I was like, they would say things like, "What's this about?" And I was like, "Why do they talk like idiots?" And I was just a kid. And I was like, "Why do they all talk stupid?" And later on, it was years. I had no idea. And then years later, I heard people talking like that, and they were Canadian. I was like, "Oh, was that a Canadian show?" And I went back and looked it up, and yeah, it was a Canadian kids show. So
yeah,
that made sense. But anyway, sorry. I thought you guys.
That's okay. I like to pretend, or at least convince myself that I don't have an accent. Like a boot. I don't say a boot. I think that's more of like an Eastern Canadian thing. But then on our honeymoon, we went on a European vacation, and it was an English speaking vacation. So there were a lot of Americans on it, and people our own age that we kind of, spent a lot of time with. And we spent a good portion of a train ride, I think it was between Paris and Nice, just like getting each other to say words, and they would laugh hysterically at a lot of the things I said. So apparently I do have an accent, but a boot isn't one of the things I say. But I was going to say that, other than my Canadian friends who might disagree with this, I don't think I'm a terribly spicy personality or excessively controversial. But I don't think the same could be said for you. So I am kind of excited to move forward in this conversation. But for those who don't know you, you've got a pretty unbelievable story. And I don't even think I'm fully familiar with the whole background, so I don't know how we could talk about anything else until we hear your whole well, maybe not your whole testimony, but kind of the Cole's Notes version of it.
Yeah, I normally point out that I'm not even really like crazy about sharing the story. Years ago, I made a video about it just because people are always asking me about it. And I was like, well, if I just make a video about it, then I can just tell people go watch a video if you want to know what happened. But okay. Yeah, it was because after I got out of prison, I went to college, and then the campus ministries found out I was an ex-con who became a Christian in jail, and they would ask me to come speak and share my testimony. I was like, oh, okay. And so, but it was one day I shared my testimony, and afterwards, a guy came up to me and he says, this college student. He says, yeah, that's an awesome testimony, really encouraging. I don't really have a testimony. I grew up with an awesome family, and my mom would pray for us every time we went out the door, and I grew up in church, and I've never really, I've never strayed and so on. And so, sorry, I don't really have it. I was thinking, you think you don't have a testimony? It's like that sounded weird to me. Like, because I became a Christian in jail. And then, so for years, every Christian I knew was an inmate.
Right.
So it was a convict, except for like people who would come in from outside and so on. But so that was normal. Like, everyone came from a messed up background, and everyone had done horrible, messed up stuff. And so I just thought, isn't it like way more amazing to see like the impact of actually just growing up in a good Christian family? And how is that not emphasized more? It's like, and I understand people want like the redemption story.
Yeah. The prodigal son.
So I understand. Yeah. I understand that people like that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, it's like, any idiot can fall down a hill, right? Yeah. That's just gravity. Gravity will carry you down. It's like, oh, look how far I fell down. It's okay, well, then that's stupid. But so anyway, but yeah, so I understand people are interested in those kinds of stories. But yeah, I always found it way more awesome for it's like, wait a minute, raising your kids to love Jesus actually has this awesome impact. And anyway, I always thought that was the awesome story. But
We all want freedom. Freedom to speak, to think, to worship. But what about freedom to govern ourselves? Because in the absence of effort, we become the sum of our appetites, which is what the world wants, because the more you succumb to your appetites, the easier you are to manipulate. But true freedom is the freedom to do God's will. Freedom is becoming the man that God created us to be, men of worship, sacrifice, and love. And to achieve that kind of freedom, sometimes we need an exodus from the world, which is why this January, I invite you to join tens of thousands of men embarking on the Exodus 90 challenge, which is about growing deeper in your faith by training your body, your mind, and your soul through the power of asceticism in collaboration with a local brotherhood. Inspired by the Desert Fathers of the early church, it's helping tens of thousands of men from all around the world today. So if you're ready to take the first step, download the Exodus 90 app today and invite a few friends to join you to form a local fraternity. Just go to exodus90.com/Brian. Again, that's exodus90.com/Brian. You can join a brotherhood from all around the world for the Exodus 90 challenge, which begins on Monday, January 5th, to see if it's time for your Exodus. I think there's a dimension though of like how it helps us in our faith, right? Because it's sort of like there can be a person who encounters the Lord and maybe they're in certain respects whole and healthy by all sort of superficial evaluations, but like the leper who encounters the Lord, or the paraplegic, or the demoniac who encounters the Lord and is immediately healed. I mean, the purpose of those healings is yes, because of Christ is love, and he's going to show compassion on people, but more so it's to show who he is and to inspire us with faith so that we know, yeah, this guy's the real deal. He's from God. I mean, that's the point of those miracles. So when there are people who just, have wholesome lives, they're the brother who didn't abandon the father, right? And that's important. And those people are still being healed by the Lord and being redeemed and sanctified. But also like the story of the person who just seems like a lost cause, like for the rest of us to hear about that, I think that's really, really encouraging to our faith.
Oh yeah, and I was considered a lost cause after I became a Christian. It was about, I don't know, maybe a year and a half after I became a Christian. I started. I had someone look up addresses of people that I'd been mean to over the years and so on, so I could write them letters and apologize for anything I'd done and so on. Wow. And I wrote a letter to this one Catholic girl from high school and stuff, and I apologized for mean things I'd said and so on. And she sent a letter back, and she said, "I used to pray for you." And she said, and then I eventually concluded that it was a complete waste of time, and I stopped. I figured I could do, and she said, I thought anything would be a better use of my time than praying for you. And so she said, I hope, I'm glad everything's working out for you now. And she said a bunch of nice things. And she goes, unless this is one of your mentally deranged little buddies who's sending me this message, and in which case never speak to me again. Yeah. And so even then she didn't trust me. She didn't trust that she didn't trust that I was that I must be speaking the truth.
What gave you the idea to do that? Was that like through spiritual direction, or just you were prompting yourself to do that?
Well, I mean, you read in the Bible and you read Zacchaeus and so on, and he tries to make things right. If you've done something wrong, you can't undo it. You can't undo it, but you can kind of make amends. Try to do the best you can.
Well, that's awesome.
So as far as the background, I was 18 years old. I was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder after attacking my dad with a hammer. And so antisocial personality disorder, I didn't even know what it was when they gave me the diagnosis. I just thought it meant, it says antisocial, so I'm not very social. It's like, you're right. People are gross and stupid and disgusting. So yeah, I don't like people all that much. But so I just thought it meant I'm antisocial. And then it was later that I found out it said, this is the disorder that psychopaths and sociopaths have. So psychopath and sociopath are like popular names for people with antisocial personality disorder. So it turns out to be something pretty bad. But so I didn't even know what it was once they told me I had it. It was later when I actually looked it up and I was like, oh, hey, this is bad stuff here. This is what serial killers have and so on. But you're growing up, and I think we need to, someone needs to make this a standard part of education, that young people at some point are familiarized with the symptoms of like antisocial personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder and so on, so that if these kids ever grow up and they start exhibiting symptoms, they'll know what it is. Because if they don't know what it is, they'll just think they're special in some way or better in some way.
Do you think,
because that's what I ended up thinking.
would that have helped you if you had been more fluent in these concepts?
I think so, because I would have known that it's an actual like problem and it's a defect. I eventually found out that it's a defect, but when you're growing up, you don't know that this is a thing, that this is something that's familiar to psychiatrists and so on. You notice you react differently than other people. And then, over time you process and you figure out, why am I reacting different from other people? And you just end up thinking that you're superior to everyone else. Not so. In other words, you think you have some ability that everyone else lacks, when in reality you lack an ability that everyone else has. So you don't react emotionally. You don't feel bad when things happen. You don't feel guilt when you do something horrible. Everyone else does, and you're thinking, why? What is the point of that? You regret this thing that you did in the past and feel bad. What's the point of the bad feeling? If you don't want to do it anymore, don't do it anymore. It makes no sense. And then like crying and stuff, crying over bad things happening. It's like, what is that changing? It makes no sense. And so you're looking around. Everyone else seems irrational, because they've got these emotions and they have these emotional reactions to things that you don't have. And so you think they're all messed up in some way, and I'm the one who's not. I'm beyond all of this. And so you think they're all messed up, and you're the only like sane, rational one. And so you end up thinking you're better than everyone else, and that definitely doesn't help. But the first time I always give the example of my dog, because that's the first time I saw it. But I grew up, I had this dog named Goliath, this just raggedy little mutt, but it was we'd go walking through the woods all the time and so on. He got in a fight with this giant groundhog once and ripped him to shreds. And so anyway, he was cool companion for walking through the woods. But I was about 5 years old, and we were over someone else's house, and my mom got a phone call, and then she turns to me, her eyes are welling up with tears and so on. And she told me that Goliath had been run over by a bus. And like the first thought that popped into my head was, so what? It's just a dog. But then I'm looking at her, and she's crying, and I'm like, why is she crying? She hated my dog. She didn't like that dog. And like, did she think that the dog was going to live forever? And we know that the dog would run out into the road because he's stupid. So did you think that, that was never going to, what's wrong with you? Like, what's wrong with you? So I thought my mom was weird. I thought there was something wrong with her crying over a dog. And then maybe a year and a half, 2 years later, we were living somewhere else. We were living, it was me and my mom. We were living in this giant house. It was not a nice place. Everyone there was doing drugs. Even the kids there had like their own pot plants and stuff like that. But we had like this community dog, and the dog ran out into the road one day, and it got hit. It got a broken leg, and then they put a cast on it and stuff like that. And then, a couple months later, it ran out there again, and it got run over by so that died. Got hit by a car. And I came home, and all the kids there were sitting around the table, and they were all crying. But it was like weird to me, because they were older, but these were like the tough kids. They were like a gang. These were like super tough kids, always fighting and stuff, drinking, doing drugs and so on. But they're crying over a dog. But this time I was like, okay, well, I need to fit in. And I was like, okay, how do I fit in? And for some reason, I thought it was the angle of their heads as they're like leaning at the table crying. And so I copied the angle of their heads. I leaned my head forward and I put my head down. And so, but I'm still looking around to see if I'm doing it right. And so I'm imitating them. And all of a sudden, one of the kids, his name was Todd, he looks at me and he goes, "Dave don't even care." And I was thinking, well, you're right. I don't. It's a dog, and your stupid dog just ran into the street. And even after getting hit by a car, it did it again. So that thing is not meant to survive. So I'm thinking things like that, and they're all crying because their dog is dead. But anyway, I was like, okay, so whatever I'm supposed to be copying here, it's more than just a head tilt. So that's kind of what goes on. But that sort of thing happens over and over again. You see how everyone else is reacting, but you start trying to blend in, and you start imitating everyone else's reactions until, if it's a situation you've been in multiple times, then you pick up on how to react to everything. But also at the same time, you start learning everyone else's triggers, what triggers their behaviors and so on, and what triggers their emotions. And once you learn that, you can start using that. And so you develop the ability to manipulate people over time.
Interesting.
And yeah, so that sort of thing was just going on for years. But I also have some sort of other problem, like on my the paperwork they gave me with my diagnosis that said antisocial personality disorder. It also said rule out schizophrenia, which means they wanted to check me more on that. And that was interesting because I wasn't telling them anything. I wasn't telling them anything about various sort of delusional thinking that I'd had over the years. So whatever that is, like antisocial personality disorder is not associated with like delusional thinking, but I had delusional thoughts as well. So like the first time I remember that was I was maybe 7 or 8 years old. No, it would have to be 8 because we moved to West Virginia. But I was about 8 years old, and I was watching a line of ants walk alongside this lake, and I was staring at them and watching them march. And suddenly it just became clear to me that ants actually controlled the world and were tricking us human beings into thinking that we were in charge. So ants were like super intelligent beings and so on. And people think, well, why would you conclude something so stupid? It's not, oh, here's all this evidence and I'm concluding it based on this evidence. It's weird. It just suddenly becomes clear to you. And you're wondering why no one else is seeing it. But that sort of thing, that didn't last. That would last a couple hours or something like that. I would be thinking that, and then it would go away. And then as time went on, I would think that about like dogs and cats, that they were actually super into. It was whenever like an animal was looking at me, like in my eyes, like a human would look at me, and then I would think it's trying to send me a message, something like that. So anyway, that sort of thing happened over the years. Like all of 10th grade, I thought I controlled the weather, but that I didn't know how I was controlling the weather. So, the weather would change and I would think, oh, how did I do that? And then when I was 18.
But it was never like hallucinations
18, then
or like voices or anything like that?
No. Okay. No, it was just weird thinking like that. And then I eventually like started thinking that people were reading my mind, and then I was part of an experiment. And even that, it wouldn't. The only time it was like really sustained was like all of 10th grade when I thought I controlled the weather. Other than that, it was like it would happen for a little while. I would think people are reading my mind and I'm part of an experiment, and then it would just go away for a while. So yeah, these kinds of things all combined. And
did they rule out schizophrenia then in that case, or was that something that you were
no, and
with?
that's. No, I never. I was put in another mental hospital later, but yeah, I shared as little information as possible. I don't even know why they started. I don't know what clued them in to start asking that, because I wasn't telling them anything. I didn't tell them anything about thinking that ants ruled the world or that people were reading my mind. But I was at Chestnut Ridge Psychiatric Hospital, and all of a sudden one of the psychiatrists comes in and he sits beside me and he goes, "David, have you ever been listening to a song or watching a show and you thought it was speaking directly to you?" And I was like, "Yeah, a bunch of times." And but like I was like, "How do you know that?" And so I interpret that as like, is this guy reading my mind? How would he know that? I didn't tell him any of that. Which obviously they're trained to pick up on things, so they had picked up on something. So that's why they started asking me about that. And like even then, I was thinking, okay, either they're reading my mind or they're just trained to be able to read people and to spot lies. So in that situation, I would try to give them accurate information, but as little information. So I'd speak the truth, but I would try to give them as little information as possible. So when he asked me if I ever thought anything was talking to me, I gave like the simplest, true answer. I said, yeah, I was listening to this song one time and it kept saying, may the road rise with you. And that's an old saying, but I thought it was telling me to do something. I thought it was telling me to do something. And I was trying to figure out what it was telling me to do. So I told him that. And tell him like bigger examples. Like when I read Crime and Punishment, I thought that was speaking directly to me. In other words, I thought it's like which made no sense because I was an atheist. I was a complete naturalist. The universe is like all that there is. And yet I thought that the universe was somehow giving me a message through the book Crime and Punishment about what I'm supposed to do. But anyway, I didn't tell them any of that. But
to be fair, it's hard to read Dostoevsky without drawing parallels to your own life and the characters that because I mean, he is such a psychological genius that there's so much insight to grasp from those. I mean, like I know people who in my personal life who had read Dostoevsky and recommended his books, both Crime and Punishment and the Brothers Karamazov. And I remember reading them and thinking of those people and thinking like, I think that they've really read themselves into these stories. I think he has that effect, but obviously in your case, it was a little bit more amplified than that.
Yeah, it was, I had basically concluded what Raskolnikov's philosophy was in the book, that everyone else is bound by these rules and some people are just beyond all of them and they should live
and
accordingly.
You thought that about yourself the way that he did.
I concluded that already. That's what would normally trigger something like something as a message. I would conclude something and then I would be reading something or it could be a comic book or anything, but like that was the big one where I concluded it and then I read it. As a matter of fact, I mean, it was the chain of events. Like I concluded it, and then I was breaking into a store and I stole a bunch of stuff, and then I ran from the cops and I swam across a river to get away from the cops, and then I on the other side of the river they had to go across a bridge to chase me down on the other side of the river, but I was running up the side of this hill, and I ended up in someone's backyard, and there was this big garden in front of me, and I was about to walk around the garden, and then I stopped and I thought, why am I walking around the garden? I don't care about the people in the house. I don't care about their vegetables. Why am I walking around the garden? And so I walked right through the garden. I walked straight through it. And like right when I walked through it, it's like it was a clicking that there are no rules that I have to follow here. I'm already running from the cops. I'm walking, and then I'm walking through someone's garden, and it's like I do not have to follow any rules. I'm beyond all this nonsense. Wow. What are you guys going to do to me? And then right after that, I'm reading Crime and Punishment. I'm talking like the next day. I'm reading Crime and Punishment, and then I see that in Crime and Punishment, and I'm like, this is for me. This is exactly what I think. And so you combine all that. You combine antisocial personality disorder and then like delusional thoughts about yourself and why you're so great and so on, and ended up doing lots of things over the years. And every time I would do something that was new and like breaking the rules that people had tried to impose on me, got like this rush of freedom, like, and it was like I had been polluted. Like whatever rule you're putting in me, you're like inserting it in my head or whatever, and it's like somehow polluted the real me. And when I would do the opposite, when I would do whatever I'm not supposed to do, it was like I pulled it out and tossed it away and was getting to like more of the real me. And so I eventually decided I was going to kill my dad, and that this was going to be like the final, like what rule could you break that's bigger than that? So I thought that I would kill my dad, and then like that would be the real me. I would finally be completely rid of everything people had imposed on me. Was that really the only motive for taking those steps, or did you have a bad relationship with your dad or any other mitigating factors? No. Wow. Nope. It was that. It's like the final stage. It was the final stage of your character arc. it's kind of weird because it's like this weird purification. It's this weird purification ritual of purifying myself from
like
everything
an
else.
anti-sacrament almost.
Yeah, it's really it's odd stuff. But so I hit my dad 7 or 8 times in the head with a hammer, and then left and thought that this was, well, it was like the real me. But I thought it was going to be this, this awesome feeling of being in complete control and being completely superior to it. But it was just like there was no feeling, like there was no good or bad feeling. After that, it was just like the word numb or something like that doesn't describe it. It's just there's no feeling at all. And so anyway, ended up in a mental hospital. That's when they concluded that I have antisocial personality disorder. And you don't keep people with antisocial personality disorder in a mental hospital. You send them to jail and prison and so on. So they so I went to jail, and in jail I met a Christian named Randy. And later on, looking back, it was interesting how we ended up in the same spot. I was in a different dorm, and there was this guy who was annoying everyone and getting into fights. And I don't know his real name. His nickname was Duke, but he had long dreadlocks and stuff. Was always running his mouth, and he carried this mechanical pencil that he was always like saying he was going to stab someone with. And so I wanted to fight him, but I didn't want to get in any trouble because I was still waiting for sentencing. And so I told everyone there, there were about, I don't know, 5 or 6 of us that would stay up at night and play cards when everyone else went to sleep. And Duke would stay up as well. But everyone else who stayed up really hated him. And so I told everyone else, I said, hey, I'm gonna grab Duke's pencil. I'm gonna stab myself with it, and then I'm gonna beat his face in all over this dorm. When the cops come, you just say, hey, yep, Duke stabbed him with a pencil, and so David was just defending himself. So I planned that, and that night I was going to do it, and then all of a sudden cops come in and they break up the entire dorm. They send everyone to different parts, which means that someone snitched. Someone told the police, but they didn't say exactly who it was. They said, hey, something's about to go down, but we're not telling you who it was. So someone snitched, and they broke up the block before the fight, and they sent me to a different block. And I got over to a different block, and there's this Christian who just sits up on his bunk. The rest of us are playing cards and stuff, and he just sits up on his bunk, reading his Bible. And so one day I walked up to him and I said, hey man, you know why you're reading the Bible? You're reading the Bible because you're born in the United States. If you'd been born anywhere else, you believe in something else. If you'd been born in China, you'd be a Buddhist. If you'd been born in India, you'd be a Hindu. If you'd been born in Saudi Arabia, you'd be a Muslim, because people like you believe whatever you're taught to believe. Which was really stupid because...
That's Dawkins' line of argumentation. This is brilliant response.
And it was especially stupid because what I believed about how the universe got here and how life formed and developed, all this stuff was just stuff I heard in a 9th grade or 10th grade classroom and so on, and I didn't question it. So I believed what I was told to believe. But anyway, I'm pointing at this guy saying he just believes what people are telling him to believe. And this was interesting because this was the first Christian who actually fought back. There were other Christians who would fight back, start arguing back for a minute or two, and as soon as you start getting aggressive, they go, "Oh, well, hey, this isn't something we argue over." But this guy was he was completely willing to argue over things, and as we talked and argued, and then we would hang out and stuff like that, and chat and play cards even. He turns out this guy had been a criminal in his younger days, and then he became a Christian and joined the Navy, and then one day he decided to walk into a police station and confess to everything he'd done years earlier and so on. And so he turned himself in and for 21 felonies. And so this is why I was locked up with this guy. And he was a pretty interesting guy. There'd be a fight, and I'd ask him about the fight later. I'd say, "Hey, did you see that fight between so-and-so?" And he'd say, "No, I turned away, and I was praying that it would stop." Which, I mean, it's weird and it doesn't make any sense. It's like our main form of entertainment in there was watching fights and so on. He didn't like it. And so there's something weird about it, but it's, it made him he was definitely different.
Yeah.
And so we'd have these
curiosity.
arguments and so on. And it's funny because Greg Kokel has a book called Tactics, where he, tells people to, like, ask questions, ask people questions about what they're claiming and so on. And this was before Tactics, but Randy just had that kind of habit that I would say things and he would question me about them, and I didn't even know what I was talking about. And him asking me questions about it would kind of reveal that I didn't know what I was talking about. So I would say things like, well, all scientists agree that blah, blah, blah. And he would go, really? All scientists agree? You know what all scientists say on this topic? And it was just like, yeah, I am making that up. I just, whenever I want to confirm something, I just say all scientists agree on this or something like that. So, it was constantly like that sort of like it kind of exposing me to myself,
Right.
As we're talking. But it got really annoying because, keep in mind, I thought I was like the most advanced human being who'd ever lived. And I'm sitting here losing arguments to some Christian who was dumb enough to turn himself in for 21 felonies. And so I had to wrestle with this, like, why is this guy beating me in arguments and so on? So I would like mess with him, and I would say messed up stuff to him here and there. And, then we'd be buddies again. And then I'd say something really messed up to him and he'd get mad. And then we'd be buddies again. Anyway, we eventually got into this epic fasting battle. He wasn't battling me. He was just fasting. He's like, hey, I can do long-term fasting because I'm in jail. I don't have obligations to go around and be doing things. So he would fast for 7 days at a time. And I was so obsessed with beating him at something at this point, I said, all right, I'm going 10. So the first time I ever fasted was for 10 days straight on nothing but water. And then he would fast, and then I would fast. And whatever he did, I would go a couple days longer. Eventually he noticed this. He said, hey, how come every time I fast, you go a couple days later? It's like, just coincidence. But then he went 40 days. He went 40 days.
Wow.
He said that Jesus had done it, that Moses had done it. But he went 40 days. He went 32 days on nothing but water. And I know he gave me all his trays, and then I would eat them or sell them or something like that. But he went 32 days on nothing but water, and then he started drinking Kool-Aid and so on. He started drinking liquids, Kool-Aid and juice and so on to prepare his body for food again. And he didn't eat till after 40 days. And when he finished, I thought, all right, I'm going 42. So I'm going 42. And he's like, look, I know you're trying to outdo me now. I was like, look, man, 42. Why are you stopping at 40? You could do an even 6 weeks. Why are you stopping before an even 6 weeks? So I actually it was just, so it'd be an even 6 weeks. But I was on day number 11 when I passed out in front of a guard. Guard came in, asked if anyone needed a form, and I stood up, and then everything went dark, and I wake up, and people are looking down at me like, hey, you okay? And anyway, this guy, Jeff, he told me, he said, yeah, you walked up and then you stopped. And then he said, and all of a sudden it looked like you were a snake standing on its tail. He just started going like that. And then you dropped down. But so the guards concluded that I was trying to end my own life really, really slow. Like I'm sitting there trying to beat the Christian. I'm trying to beat the Christian. They think they're looking at my mental health history and thinking, okay, this guy's trying to end himself.
Wow.
So they stuck me in a camera cell. They put a camera on me, and I'm just me in a cell with a camera pointed at me so they could keep their eyes on me and see what I was doing. But back there in that little cell, that's when I realized, okay, the reason I keep losing in arguments with this Randy guy is that I've never studied the stuff that we're talking about. And so now I can actually study back here. And then when I go back to the dorm, then I'll be able to crush him because I'll know what I'm talking about. So, was studying Christianity back then.
How did you study it?
reading-
Were you just reading the Bible, or were you reading like apologetics?
No, I had a Gideon's Bible. I didn't know what apologetics was,
Sure.
but I was reading some apologetics.
Okay.
So there were books by Randy. Randy gave me books. I didn't know what apologetics was till like another maybe year and a half later or something like that. But so I just thought I was reading stuff about Christianity. But I was reading the Bible. I was doing Bible studies. I asked the chaplain there. I said, "Give me some Bibles. Give me whatever Bible studies you got." So I mean, these are like they send you your lesson, and there are ministries that do this for inmates, but they send you your lesson, you do your reading, you read your Bible passage, you do questions, you fill out your answers, you write a couple of little essays and stuff and send them back, and they grade them. And so here I am, an atheist trying to learn enough to crush this Christian and doing all these Bible studies and so on. And it was basically three things started coming together over time. There was a kind of design argument where it started. I was looking at the bricks stacked up in the cell I was in, and I thought, if someone told me that these bricks went into this order by themselves, by some natural process, not by being put here, I'd smack them in the mouth for saying something stupid like that. But here I believe that life formed on its own, and life is way more, like the most basic life form is way more sophisticated than some bricks stacked on top of each other.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here thinking about that, and it was actually like deeper than that, but it's harder to describe. It was kind of like the bricks are in this order, but for them to be in any kind of order for any of this stuff to be here, it's like there was a time when, like, if you go all the way back to the Big Bang, there's a time when it was all it could blow up into this and become all this, but it hadn't yet. It was just like it had the potential to be that. It was like it was all there waiting to happen, but hadn't happened yet. And so, but it was something weird, like all this design was kind of there in some singularity before it was ever out here. And like, how is it like there in a singularity to be all of this? There's something, anyway,
it has to be potential. I started thinking about that. It's actual.
Yeah, and I didn't know the terms yet. Later on, I studied philosophy, and then I learned about act and potency and so on. So yeah, it was everything that's actual right now was once just potential, but that potential, that's not nothing. That's something.
Yeah.
Think it's like it's this entire universe and everything in it, and every thought we've ever had. It was all like waiting to happen, like a thought. Right. You know what I mean? It's like it was like it was like a thought that was there.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I was thinking about that. That was weird. Randy had told me how the apostles died, and he gave me a copy of Fox's Book of Martyrs.
Okay.
And so I was reading about how the apostles died. And I found out later, I had a discussion with Sean McDowell, did a discussion and posted that on my channel. But it turns out some of those sources are very late, and you can't trust them on the deaths of some of the apostles. But some of them are very early and reliable. And so back then, I concluded that all the apostles except John died some sort of violent death. So it turns out we're not sure about some of them, but we are pretty sure about others. But that started bothering me because when I'd heard about Christianity, I thought I explained it like really easily.
Okay.
And what I thought was, okay, so Jesus was some sort of teacher. He had followers. He died, and in order to keep the movement going, to keep the movement alive, they made up a story about him rising from the dead. And that made perfect sense to me. You want to keep the movement going, you make up a story about him rising from the dead, and it obviously worked because here we are, and people still believe it all these centuries later.
Yeah.
But then I find out how these guys were willing to endure torture and death for what they were claiming, and that didn't make sense. I tried to think of one other person in history who died for something that he knew he made up.
And for what great benefit, I don't know why, too, right? Like to keep the movement going, but like what advantage is there in that? Like fame, money, like none of these things were on the table for them.
Yeah, none of that worked. And so I tried to, and I don't know why some people have trouble grasping this, because I saw it like instantly, like it doesn't make sense to make something up and then to be ready to endure torture and death. And instantly just people start going, but what about terrorists who dies? Like, yeah, when a terrorist, dies blowing himself up to, take out the unbelievers and go to paradise, doesn't mean it's true, but he obviously believes it. I would say he obviously believes what he's dying for, which means that he isn't saying, hey, I'm just going to make up this religion and then go out and die for it. He really has to believe it. But that's the case for pretty much anyone who's willing to die today, whether you're Christian or Muslim or whatever. If you're willing to die for what you believe, that's the point. You are willing to die for what you believe. But the difference is, if you're a Christian today or a Muslim today or something like that, then you'd be willing to die for a message that someone shared with you, and you became convinced that it's true.
You're not dying for
These
a
guys,
lie that you made up.
Yeah, these guys were dying for something they claimed that they saw.
Yeah.
We saw this guy. So it wasn't some message that they heard and said, you know what, we really believe this and we're ready to go out and die for it. They're dying for something that they claim they had seen a man who had risen from the dead. And I tried to think of one person ever who died for something that he knew he made up. I couldn't think of one person. And then it was, okay, well, maybe there could be some weird person who would be willing to do that. But really, does Jesus get all these guys? All of them? Like,
yeah, you could find somebody with delusions, sure. But yeah, when it's a whole group of people for the same apparent delusion, that gets a lot trickier.
So that started bothering me in that I realized, wait, I thought I had explained Christianity. My explanation does not work. There has to be something else here. And so these guys obviously believed that Jesus had risen from the dead and appeared to them. What could have convinced them of that? What could have possibly convinced all these guys that Jesus had risen from the dead and appeared to them? And there's not a good explanation that really fits, other than he actually appeared to them. Every other explanation just kind of really breaks down and doesn't fit the facts that we have. So there was that, and then the other thing was a kind of moral argument, and it was. I always I believe that everything is ultimately meaningless. You've got this huge universe, and our sun. I mean, our galaxy is like this tiny little speck, and then our sun is this pathetic piece of dust, and going around that is this little chunk of rock called Earth, and there's little blobs of cells crawling all over it, thinking they're so important. It's like, what do you think you're doing in the universe? It's like nothing you do changes anything on any sort of significant scale. And then you're going to die, and then we're all going to be dead, and then nothing will have changed. And so what was the point of any of it? It doesn't make any sense. So I thought that everything is really meaningless, but at the same time, I thought I'm like this super important, most advanced, greatest human being who's ever lived. And those don't go together. Like, what does it mean to be the most advanced, meaningless lump of cells in a completely meaningless world? That those don't go together. So you have to drop one. If everything's really just completely pointless and meaningless, then it's all like a sad joke, then that's what I am too.
Yeah.
But if I am somehow greatest, then there'd have to be something like more and some standard of greatness. But what would that be? And I start thinking about what if there is some standard that makes this better than that? Why would I think that I'm high up on that scale? Why would I think I'm the top of that scale? Because I don't know what it is. I don't even know how to define what the scale or the standard would be that would make me the top of it. Just sitting there thinking about that, and then it was like, okay, well, if there is some standard of human greatness or something like that, why would I think that it's me and not Jesus? Like, what am I really the greatest at, and so on. And anyway, in a pretty short amount of time, I went from thinking that I'm the greatest human being who had ever lived to thinking I'm the worst human being in the world.
Okay.
I mean,
because now you had a standard to compare yourself to that was more than just your own imaginings.
It was something. It was just like it. I mean, it was just like I'm looking at myself. I'm in this cell. Yeah. And just from fasting, I'd gone from about 235 pounds down to a little under 150. And, I'd stand up and I'd pass out and bust my head. The doctor was saying, he kept taking my blood, which was annoying me because I was like, I can't replace my blood very well because I'm not eating anything. But he kept taking my blood, and he said, the blood test is going to show when my body eventually starts feeding off its own internal organs. And he said, at that point, we are sticking a tube in you, and we're going to force feed you. Yeah. So he's telling me that. My lawyer told me that the psychiatrist was going to have me sent to another mental hospital, but on a long-term basis now. I couldn't stop drooling. I got to a point where I got sick of spitting into a cup. So I just hung my head over the side of the bunk and put a cup on the floor and just drooled into the cup. And I got this rash all over me, called shingles for people who had it. But I would get it when I didn't eat for a long time, because then it's vitamin deficiency, and then that weakens your immune system, and then the chickenpox virus reactivates in your body. But it feels like poison ivy. And it's so I'm just constantly scratching myself, drooling, and I'm sitting there and thinking about torturing people, and then reading about Jesus and reading the Gospels, and then I'm thinking, it's just looking around. It's like, I seriously think I'm the best. I think I'm the best person in the world. Like I'm hearing as hell for bashing my dad's head in and drooling into a cup with a rash all over me. And if I stand up, I fall over and I'm about to be sent to another mental hospital. And before that, they're going to start tube feeding me. And I'm really the greatest human being in the world. It just kind of hit me like that. Like, based on what? What? And so anyway, just like, no, this is pathetic, man. This is pathetic. There are other people who are starving in the world. At least they can think straight. I can't even think straight. Just thinking, okay, who in the world is more screwed up than I am? And that was actually good. It's actually good to just completely hit absolute rock bottom and realize that, because once you realize that, then you got a decision to make. You got a little. Once you ask yourself, hey, wait a minute. If I'm really the most screwed up person in the world, and this is where all my thinking has gotten me, and this is how I am. This is what I really am. Again, when I attacked my dad, it was like I wanted to see what I really am. It's like, now it's hitting me. This is what I really am. And when you start thinking like that, then the question becomes, okay, here are the options. Either this is what I am, and I'm stuck like this, and this is just the way things are, or there's someone out there who can fix this sort of thing. And when you ask that question, okay, is there someone out there who can help fix this sort of thing? Well, who, out of anyone in history, who had a reputation of being able to take like really messed up people and do something with them? You get a list of one. It's not Muhammad. You get a list of one. It's Jesus. Jesus is the one who would, legion of demons. Okay, well, here, I can fix that. So Jesus is the one who can deal with those kinds of things. And all of that combined, the rethinking the origin of Christianity and thinking about the evidence for Jesus' resurrection, and then a weird kind of moral argument, and then a kind of design argument. But it didn't I wasn't like, hey, I know this is true. Yeah. It was more like, this looks like it might be true.
And what do you got to lose?
Could be true. There's good evidence for that. And that's exactly what I thought. It's like, what have I got to lose if I pray and like nothing happens? It's not like, oh, now I'm going to be real bad off because I prayed and nothing happened. It's like, okay, well then I just be right back where I am. So I decided, okay, what have I got to lose? And I bowed down on my bunk and I prayed and I said, God, I don't know if I'm going to believe in you tomorrow, but I believe in you right now. And if there's anything you can do with me, you're welcome to it. And so then I just prayed some stuff from those, they would put little gospel messages at the end of the Bible studies and so on. So I prayed along those lines, and I sat up from that prayer, and the entire world looked different. Like it all, like if you always had on, like, let's say red colored glasses or something, then all of a sudden they took them off, everything would look different. But that's what it was like. It was like everything had changed colors. So there was that. And then I'm not big on, basing things on feelings, because feelings can be all over the place. I remember, like, Josh McDowell said that he became a Christian. He said, I felt like I was going to throw up when I became a Christian. But, I'll tell people what the feeling was. Like, some people describe it as like feeling a weight lifted off them or something like that. It was different, and it was instant. It felt like that I had been fighting in like a fight pit, like my entire life, like since a baby, like a baby David was born and was thrown into a fight pit and had spent his entire life just fighting and swinging in every direction and didn't know anything else. And to the point, I didn't even know it. I didn't even know that this was how I was living. And then all of a sudden it just stopped. And so if anyone can imagine what it would be like being born and thrown into a fight pit and fighting your entire life and not knowing anything else, and then it just all of a sudden everyone stops. That's what it was like. And so that was in jail and had several years to serve in prison after that. But I spent the rest of my time. Prison's pretty straightforward. You read your Bible, you go lift some weights, you come back, you read your Bible some more, you lift some weights. I eventually found out what apologetics was, so started studying apologetics, and that's how I did my time.
What did Randy think, or was he still in your block with you when you had that conversion experience?
No, I was in the cell. But I did, after I became a Christian, I did go to a church service and in the jail there, and Randy was in the church service, and it was funny because all Randy knew was that I was an atheist.
Yeah.
And a guy finished speaking at the church service, and when he starts giving like the altar call thing, I lean over to Randy and go, "Hey, Randy, about to make you proud." And he goes, "What are you going to do? Don't do it. What are you going to do?" He thought I was going to like disrupt things or something like that, or cause a scene.
Yeah.
And and anyway, so I went up and prayed in front of everyone, and I heard Randy in the back go, "Praise God." And so, yeah.
Have you kept in touch with him?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I mean, there's so much about your story that like I feel like we could spend the entire interview on that. I do want to move on to other things, but like a couple of highlights for me are talking about crime and punishment. I mean, that's so interesting because, you know, Raskolnikov's story is not a template for what you ought to do, right? Like Raskolnikov had the same kind of assumptions that you had, it sounds like, that like he's one of these people that are made different. He can go and do certain kinds of things. He can be like a Napoleon and curate the destruction of other nations and even order the killing of other people. And he's above all that. He's above conscience and morality and stuff. And then when he commits his crime, it destroys him, right? Like he has physiological reactions to it, psychological reactions. It completely paralyzes him in life. And so it's interesting that you didn't read that thinking like, oh, maybe, or was it just confirmation for you that like, hey, that doesn't happen to me. I actually am who Raskolnikov wanted to be.
Yes, that's what it was. It was,
yeah, okay.
The message is, he's right, but it's just not him.
Yeah.
So it's someone else.
Yeah.
So it's someone else, and it must be me. But anyway, I like afterwards, after I attacked my dad, thinking back to Crime and Punishment, I was thinking like, Dostoevsky either killed someone or he was talking to people who killed someone, because he's right. Like he has Raskolnikov walking and he's like checking his stuff and he's convinced that he missed some spot of blood. But I remember that. I was thinking there's got to be blood on me. I'm not seeing it. Maybe I'm just not seeing it. There's got to be, there must be blood on me and things like that. So I was like, okay, he knows what's going on in someone's mind after they've killed someone. So either he did something or he's doing some good interviews with someone who had.
Mm-hmm. Well, he ended up in Siberia, and then you probably know this about him, right? Like he ended up.
Yeah, I found that out later.
He was sentenced to death, and they commuted his sentence right at the moment when like they were up against the wall about to be shot. And so, yeah, you have to assume that he's seen some things and heard some things through his travels, because there's no way you would have such an intimate awareness of like those kinds of depths of narcissism and psychopathy, if that's what it was. Without knowing somebody's story like that intimately, because it's incredibly realistic, and it's a hard read for that reason. It's so hard to spend that much time with a character like Raskolnikov and be like, I can't be in this guy's head anymore. It's too awful, right? But you lived that and you experienced that. Something else that stands out for me is like the way that we treat mental illness today, right? Like we will say, oh, he's missing something that other people have, whether it's a certain kind of emotional constitution or a way of thinking. But it seems to me that like these kinds of mental illnesses always sort of lend themselves towards serious moral deficiencies as well, right? Like if we looked at this physiologically, so like say somebody's missing a limb or an organ or something like that, that doesn't cause them to go and attempt to murder somebody, right? But when there's a deficiency in our mind, it almost always does lead to that sort of consequence. And that's what I find really frustrating about the psychological explanations for these things, because this is definitely a spiritual reality to this as well, right? Like psyche means spirit. It means it's a treatment of the soul in sort of the ancient classical tradition. But in the modern tradition, we try to reduce all that to mere material phenomenon without addressing the moral dimension of it. We just say, oh, that's a disorder that we don't really want, and so we'll try and correct it. But it's like, no, it's something. It's a moral defect that is contributing to this, or causing at least a moral defect. Like, do you think about these things, or is that consistent with your assessment of your own experience?
It's just a situation I'm not sure of. Yeah. I
Okay.
don't know.
Do you find that like the diagnoses that you were given, has it continued to help you? Like, do you still think of yourself as having that same diagnosis today, or have things changed for you through your own sort of moral practice of being a Christian and obviously the spiritual graces that come with that?
Some things changed. Some things changed instantly. Like
Yeah.
I didn't have delusional thoughts stopped, and then thoughts of like violent thoughts, like thoughts of like wanting to torture people and kill people.
Yeah.
That just stopped instantly.
Yeah.
And it was. So I thought I'd been healed of that sort of thing, and I remember it was probably a couple years later when I got this urge to. There was a correctional officer, and I saw this flashlight, and I was just like a big metal flashlight.
Yeah.
I was just take that flashlight and just start bashing, but it was weird. It was like it was coming from outside now. It was like a thought that was coming from outside, and that was totally normal before I became a Christian. But then it stopped after I became a Christian. And then like a couple years later, it was a quick thought, and it was like, where did that come from? And so for years, I thought I'd been healed of like the delusional thinking and the violent thoughts. Apart from like that little glimpses like that went away. But years later, like after I got out, I was going to college and so on. I'd get so busy that I wouldn't keep up with Bible reading, and then eventually wouldn't even be praying. And then I would start getting like delusional thoughts again.
Okay.
And so I concluded that, I can't say I've been healed. It's more like God is sustaining me, and that I'd better keep up a good relationship with God, or I'll start losing it again. I got to the point. My friend, my best friend in college was Nabil, but Nabil, after he became a Christian, he got to the point where he could tell. He would ask me, he'd go, "Hey man, you been reading your Bible and praying?" And I go, "No, I've been too busy." And he goes, "Yeah, I know, I can tell, because you start acting weird." And so yeah, that was people could pick up on it if I started acting weird again. But anyway, so there's those kinds of issues. But then like antisocial personality disorder, you don't have normal emotional reactions when bad things happen. You don't feel sad when bad things happen. You don't, like, people could die in front of you. There's no bad feeling about it. And you don't feel guilt if you've done something wrong. That's never changed. I'm still like that.
Okay.
I'm still like that. So like people die. There's no bad feeling. I've done messed up stuff. I've done really bad stuff in my life. I've never felt bad over it. I can recognize that it's wrong and say, okay, that is wrong. That is a violation of what God has commanded. And so I'm not doing that anymore. But there's no guilty feeling. Whatever people feel when they feel guilt or remorse, I've never felt it in my life, and I have no idea what you guys are feeling.
What's interesting about our sort of our passions and our emotional constitution is that it motivates us, right? Like it can motivate us towards certain goods, but also to retreat away from certain evils, right? Like it's if we feel the consequences of immoral actions, we'll say, oh yeah, I'm not going to do that again. That felt terrible, right? In your experience of not having those, I mean, you wouldn't have kind of those guardrails to direct you where you need to go morally. But do you find now as a Christian that like grace, I mean, you've kind of already described this, but does God kind of like add of himself, like what you're missing? Has that been a part of your experience as a Christian?
Yeah. And you can, I don't know if anyone else with antisocial personality disorder does this, but I'd like to talk to some therapists at some point and share my thoughts on this. But this is why I said earlier it would be important for people to know that what the symptoms are and what the disorders are, so that when they see the symptoms in other people or in themselves, they can come to a correct conclusion. Oh, this is a problem. This is a defect, and maybe need some treatment or whatever it is, but not think, oh, this means I'm superior to everyone. Because if you don't know what it is and you don't know what the symptoms are, you come to your own conclusions. And if you don't know what you're talking about, you come to the wrong conclusions. But I mentioned that the reason for that is to see it as a defect and a problem and not as your superior.
Yeah.
Because if you realize you're defective, then when you are not responding as you should, you know it's because you're defective and messed up. And that can be a kind of like replacement guilt or replacement remorse. So you don't have the feeling of remorse, but when you see this is a situation where I should be feeling remorse and that any normal person would be feeling remorse right now, I'm not feeling it because I'm defective and there's something seriously wrong with me. Well, guess what? That's not a good feeling. Thinking that you're realizing that you are so messed up, you do not have a normal human reaction to something. So that can kind of be a replacement. Like, so I don't feel the remorse, but I know it really sucks realizing that you do not react normally to things and that you're defective in that way. And in a way, you're inferior to everyone else.
Right. Yeah. Does that continue
doesn't feel good feeling inferior to everyone else.
No, obviously not. Obviously, we could probably fill in some of these gaps with respect to like why you got into apologetics. I mean, your experience is probably motivating enough to make you say, yeah, like this was so beneficial to me that I want to be able to do that for others. Is that pretty accurate, or is there more to your story about what inspired you to go into studying philosophy and obviously eventually getting into apologetics?
Well, with apologetics, it was, so I know I had mental problems and so on, but I also had an ideological problem in that I believe that everything was meaningless, that there's no real right or wrong and so on. Yeah. And all that tied together as far as the things that I did. And I realized that if I had known this stuff, if I had known that there's actually evidence for the existence of God and that there's actually evidence for Christianity and that there's evidence for Jesus and so on, if I had known that sort of thing, I wouldn't have done all this stuff. I wouldn't have done all this messed up stuff. I would have still had other problems, but I would not have lived the way I lived if that's an actually bad way to live. Yeah. And I mean, not just bad according to your opinion. I mean, it's actually bad. So there was all this stuff that I didn't know. And I'm sitting there finding it out in a jail cell, all this stuff that I was wrong about and that I didn't know about. And it's just, if I'd known this stuff, I would have lived a completely different life. And now I am living a completely different life because I've known this stuff, but everyone should know this stuff. Everyone should know this stuff so that they make an informed decision and not decision based on things that they're completely ignorant of. And so that's the main motivation, that I want other people to know things that I didn't know so that they can make better decisions than I did. Yeah.
I mean, that speaks, I mean, obviously I don't have the same background and experience that you do, but I'm a convert as well. I didn't grow up Christian or anything like that. And that's the first thing. As soon as you realize all of this benefit of this faith and then turn around and it's like, oh, now there's all these loved ones and these friends that I have that are on the outside of this thing looking in, and like, how can I draw them into this same benefit? I mean, if you love other people, it's almost impossible to avoid that desire, I would say. So you get into, that's what motivated you to start studying philosophy, then I take it.
I mean, so I started studying apologetics when I was in jail, in prison, and then I got out, went right to college, and knew I wanted to go into apologetics, but I didn't know like what area, and so I was thinking biology because that had really interested me as far as evidence for design. Yeah. So I started off as a biology major, and then I took philosophy, and it was just, I'd studied a bunch of philosophy when I was locked up, but like classic stuff, like the dialogues of Plato, and read Epictetus. I liked Epictetus. I read Marcus Aurelius. I didn't like, I hear other people, oh, Marcus Aurelius is, I don't know why I hated that stuff. But anyway, I studied philosophy, but then I was required to take a philosophy class just as a gen ed, and it was like the first or second or third day or something like that, and I just realized this is what I'm really interested in. I'm really interested in this stuff. And so then I became a double major. So I did a double major in biology and philosophy, but yeah, I continued in philosophy, and it's weird because it actually ties together one of the sort of symptoms of antisocial personality disorder is you like being in kind of dangerous situations. You're drawn to them, and that feels normal to you. And if you're not in some sort of dangerous situation, then you just like you're bored out of your mind. But philosophy is actually good for that, because you put forward your paper, your argument or something like this, and everyone's attacking it. So it's like, that's all you do in philosophy. You're attacking everyone else's positions, and everyone's attacking your position. But it's also understood that it's all good. It's good that people are attacking your position, because that's going to reveal weaknesses in your argument, and then you can modify it to take account of that, or you might just need to abandon the argument because it's a flawed argument or something like that. But it actually, I don't know, maybe people with antisocial personality disorder should go into philosophy more and start arguing and
maybe,
so on,
I mean, do you feel like your experiences and then your diagnosis is something that has been an asset for you as an apologist?
Yeah, especially with Islam.
Okay.
So I got into Islam, and the only reason I was studying Islam is because my best friend in college was a Muslim. If he'd been something else, I'd have been studying something else. But he was a Muslim and wanted to convince me that Islam is true, and so started having discussions there. And eventually, when he became a Christian, I thought, "Oh, cool, I'm done with Islam." And didn't turn out that way. He got his first death threat. It was attached to his car after about a month, and then I was thinking, "Oh, well, I'm not done with this. They're going to be going after him for the rest of his life, and they have to be going after both of us." So I kind of kept up with it. And then over time, I realized, wow, Muslims make really cool Christians. And so, hey, maybe I need to, I wasn't interested in Islam at all. There were other things I was way more interested in. Wasn't interested at all in Islam, but it was kind of, okay, maybe I need to do this because it's something that needs to get done. And then you start responding to Muslims and talking about what they say about Islam, and responding to their arguments and pointing out problems with Muhammad and problems with the Quran. And then you start getting like death threats, like, we're going to kill you. We're going to kill your family. We're going to do this to your mom. We're going to do this to your wife. We're going to do this to your kids, and so on. And that's like, to someone with antisocial personality disorder, it's like, I'm home. It's like, oh, this is a fun environment to be in. Where I'm doing something that I think I'm supposed to do, and you guys are doing everything that will absolutely not stop a psychopath. Instead, it just kind of encourages us to keep coming at your prophet and your book. And so anyway, just looking back at all that, it was funny. This was just a few years ago, but I read some article on antisocial personality disorder, and the reason I found the article interesting was that I've always had a very low resting heart rate, and they were never able to figure out why. But it started like in elementary school when they would have us check our heart rates. The teacher would say, "Okay, I'm gonna time you for 60 seconds. You count your heart rate." And then everyone would call out their heart rate at the end. They'd be saying like 76, 82. And David, what's yours? And I'd say 42. And teacher would say, "No, you counted wrong." I'm like, I know how to count. I'm not an idiot. It would just be 42. But anyway, I'd get like a physical or something like that. My heart rate would be like 40 or 44 or something. And they would go, "Are you dizzy right now?" And I go, "No, I'm fine." Go, I think there's a problem here. And I said, "Isn't a low heart rate good? Isn't that like marathon runners?" So they said, "Yeah, if you're a marathon runner, it's good. You're not, it's a problem. You have a problem here." And so they would run tests on me. They say, "We have to test your thyroid," and so on. And they could never figure out why I had this low heart rate. But then I was reading this article, and it said people with antisocial personality disorder have abnormally low resting heart rates. And the theory was, this is a theory behind the symptoms of antisocial personality disorder. It's your entire nervous system is wired for low psychological arousal. It's basically, it's like bored out of its mind. And you have to do dangerous, stupid things to get to a normal human level, right? So you're like subhuman level. You're like, your entire nervous system is like down here. It's like, again, heart rate 40, 42. And you have to do dangerous stuff to get to a normal human level of feeling. But you're only getting to what feels like a normal human being by doing stuff that is not normal,
Yeah.
according to everyone else. You're doing like reckless, dangerous stuff here, but that's what you do to get to a normal human level. So I'm just thinking about that, and it's like, that's how I am, like biologically, but then it ends up being perfect for Islam because now everyone's constantly threatening to brutally murder me and so on, and I feel right at home here. I feel right at home, like this is a good place to be.
Nothing makes you feel more human than the threats of Islam.
And it's weird, and that's why looking back at it, it's like everything that's like horribly defective about me and so on, it's like in certain contexts it's actually an advantage. Yes. And I tell people that when they message me, they're like, hey, I'm autistic, I know you've got this problem and so on, like what do you think about like why I would have this? And my advice is always like, okay, think about a situation. So normally this is a problem in certain ways. You have this and it's a problem in certain ways. Are there situations where this could actually help or be an advantage? If so, you might want to start thinking that maybe you're made for something in that area.
Mm-hmm. You must look at your life and sort of see that hand of providence kind of guiding you to this point, eh? Yeah,
I look back and it's, like every step of the way, just again, like it's like almost getting into a fight and then ending up in a dorm with the only guy who's going to annoy me enough to go and study this stuff. And then I become a Christian and, then I get out, and who do I end up sharing a room with? A Muslim who tries to convert me to Islam. So then up in Islam, and then I think I'm done. And then, no, I can't leave this guy. I can't just, now you're a Christian and you're going to be under a death sentence for the rest of your life. And I'm just going to go mind my own business. No, I have to jump into this. And then, you guys are actually making the perfect environment for me. And so, I look back at that and think that I was made for all this.
When you started to go into apologetics and you expected that to be maybe your professional trajectory, did you see yourself, like, what did you see yourself doing? Like working in pastoral ministry, or was it something else?
Well, back when I started, it was, what do apologists do? They go around speaking. So you become you get into apologetics, and then you start going around speaking at some churches or on college campuses and so on. Yeah. So I started doing, and that's how I started, and that's what Nabil and I were doing early on. Then YouTube came along, and we started posting on YouTube, but it was just for people who couldn't be at whatever we were doing. Like if we were doing some event or something, and people say, "Oh no, I wish I could be there, but I can't because I'm in a different country." It's like, okay, we'll stick that on YouTube, and you can watch it there. But we weren't thinking that it was this like important thing. It was one day we were just goofing off. We had done some stuff in a studio, and we were hanging out afterwards, and we decided to make this funny video because there was this pastor in Florida, Terry Jones. He was announcing a burn the Quran day. He was going to burn the Quran.
Okay, yeah.
And I actually debated him. I was like, hey, why are you doing this? And is that the appropriate circumstances to be doing this? So I had a debate with him on that. But at the same time, I was thinking, wait a minute. The third of the rightly guided caliphs, Uthman, burned all the Qurans. There were so many differences in the Quran by the time of the third of the rightly guided caliphs that he said, everyone hand over your Qurans. I'm burning them all, and I'm going to issue a standardized Quran. It's like, okay, they're mad about this guy. He's going to burn one Quran. Uthman burned all the Qurans to cover up all the differences. What's going on here? So we made this little just goofy video where it started off, and I'm setting up to burn this pile of Islamic books, and then Nabil walks in and he goes, David, what are you doing? You're not going to burn all these books, are you? And so then we get into this discussion where he's trying to show me that books contain valuable information. I'm saying, no, we should just burn them all. And he goes, look, I'll show you that books contain valuable information. Here, let me open one to a random page. And he opens the book, and it's about Uthman burning all the Qurans. And then we're shocked, and we decide to investigate. So we're pretending to pull up these books, just randomly opening to pages, but it's all about all the disasters of trying to preserve the Quran and versus being eaten by a sheep, and entire chapters coming up missing, and Muhammad's own companions not being able to agree on which chapters are even supposed to be in the Quran. And Muslims don't know any of this. So we put all this into the video, and then we conclude in the end, hey, you're right. Let's not burn books because they contain all this valuable information. And so we're just having fun. We posted that on YouTube. And it was like a week or 10 days later, the video hit 100,000 views. and I clicked on YouTube Analytics. I didn't know what that was. What is YouTube Analytics? I clicked on Analytics for the video, and Analytics told me back then, it said the first thing that popped up is this is where people are watching it.
Okay,
and at the top was the United States, and next was like Great Britain and so on, English speaking countries first. But I got down to like whatever it was, 7th or 8th place or something, and it said 3.6% or 3.8% Pakistan. And I just thought it's like 3.8% of 100,000 people. That's 3,800 people. That's 3,800 people who just watched this in Pakistan. We couldn't say that stuff in Pakistan. We couldn't say all that stuff in Pakistan. No. And Nabil's Pakistani.
Okay.
But we couldn't say all that stuff in Pakistan about the Quran and changes to the Quran. They'd form a mob and they'd kill you.
Yeah.
And so you couldn't say that to 38 people in Pakistan, let alone 3,800. And so it just kind of hit me right there that we've just entered into a new era of human history. Like during the time of Jesus, you wanted to say something, you had to have you say it on the side of a hill and then yell down. Or if there was a ton of people, they'd have like a relay system where someone yells it down the hill and then someone further down the hill yells it to the people down below that and so on. But that's how you had to communicate. And or you could write a book, and you had tons of people who couldn't even read, and things were expensive, and they had to be written by hand. And eventually, you get to the printing press, so now you can print more, and literacy grows, and eventually you get to radio, and then television. But television needed a studio, and so wait a minute. Right now, we just entered a stage of humanity where I, sitting in my room, can talk to people, can talk to thousands of people in Pakistan. And their leaders can't stop it anymore, because for 14 centuries, Muslim leaders have been able to keep their people kind of insulated. Like you can't give a serious criticism of Islam or they're going to chop your head off. You can't give a serious presentation of an alternative to Islam in a Muslim country. There are going to be some serious problems and they might chop your head off. And so, but now we just entered this stage where their leaders can no longer keep them insulated from hearing this. And it's just a wide open door. We can talk to anyone with an internet connection. So that's when I started shifting to YouTube. And now I'll speak if someone asks me to come and speak, but I prefer making videos. And even when I go speak, it's always in my head. Okay, it's better to sometimes have like direct communication with people and actually hanging out with people and so on. That's good. But it's kind of always in my mind, like, okay, if I'm speaking to 200 people at this church, I could have just made a video that would have been watched by 100,000.
Sure.
And so,
so
I've veered massively towards like YouTube and social media.
Do you continue to have that kind of reach in like Islamic dominated countries like Pakistan?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Tons of people. We hear from people all the time who are leaving Islam. It's actually people look at like Islam, like taking over European cities and so on. Like Islam's taking over the world. And people don't realize Islam is crumbling in the Muslim world. Islam everywhere. I mean, Iran right now is a Muslim minority country. If you look at official statistics, it'll be like, oh, we're 99% Muslim. When people are polled and it's not from the government and it's anonymous, around 40% of the population of Iran consider themselves Muslims of any kind at this point. So it's a Muslim minority
country.
What would
the others believe? Like maybe just post-Islam, or do we know?
Oh yeah. We know. I don't have the statistics right in front of me, but yeah, no, we know the figures. But you have atheists now, you have agnostics now. You still have lots of Zoroastrians.
Okay,
there.
interesting.
And they look back. Okay, this is our real heritage before Islam came and took over. So let's go back to this. And of course, you have Christians. You have Christians there, and you have a big underground church that's always growing and so on. But I mean, think about that. It's Iran and it's Muslim minority. It's estimated that around 8% of people who are officially Muslim, they're counted as Muslims in Muslim countries, average around 8% are actually closet atheists who can't tell anyone. Around 20, it was 24% a couple years ago, but it's around 26% now. But it's around 26% of young Muslims are leaving Islam, have left Islam. And so Islam is crumbling left and right. And keep in mind, this just started. Like people are like, oh, but yeah, Islam is there's still so many Muslims, 26% apostasy rate of young Muslims. That's not enough. It's like, it just started. It was, if you go back 20 years, it was close to 0%. Now it's 26%. And what's happening, we just got open access to them for the first time, like in our lifetimes.
Right.
In our lifetimes, we are the first generation that had open access to the Muslim world through technology and so on. It's like all these, thinking about, like God having a plan. I mean, just think about this. We're told like 18 years ago or so that it's basically hopeless, that you just look at the birth rates. The birth rates of Muslims are way higher.
Yeah.
And back then it was just the math. It was, hey, the birth rates of Western nations have plummeted. You're not even replacing the people who are dying. And therefore your governments are not going to allow the population to drop. So they're going to bring in people from other countries. Yeah. And the people who are having the most babies are Muslims. Wherever they go, they have the highest birth rates. And so it's math at this point. If you have a smaller group, but they have birth rates that are 3 times higher than you, it's a matter of time before they outnumber you. Yeah. And so back then it was, okay, by 2050, Islam takes over this country. By 2060, it takes over that country. And so that was all like, oh gosh, there's nothing we can do. There's nothing we can do about the math. Islam's going to take over the world. But then right when we're told all of that, all of a sudden we get open access to Muslims around the world. Now we can refute all their arguments for Islam, and we can preach the gospel and defend the gospel, and their leaders can't stop it anymore because anyone with an internet connection. And then at the same exact time, we get open access to their sources because, if you go back 100 years, you could get like a translation of the Quran if you wanted one. Yeah. But you didn't get their other sources, their hadiths, which is like that's where you learn about the life of Muhammad and the things he did. Their main sources on the life of Muhammad are like Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. Those were translated in the 1980s, and you'd still have to figure out a way to actually get the books and so on, because this is before Amazon. But those are translated in the 80s, and then other Muslim sources since then. But now anyone can go online, and it just changes everything. Like in the 1960s, when Islam is spreading, like in the African-American community with people converting like Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali and so on. Back then, they could give an argument like, look at what Christianity does. It enslaves people, whereas Muhammad freed all the slaves. Muhammad freed and liberated everyone because it's a religion of equality. Yeah. Well, if you're preaching that, no one knows how to respond to that. Why? You don't even have the sources to know what Muhammad actually did. And so it allowed the Muslim preacher to come into an area, say whatever he wants about Islam based on what's going on with the people he's talking to, could make up anything. No one's in a position to refute him because no one has the sources. Yeah. So everyone's at a massive disadvantage if this guy's lying, which he was. But now, if someone were to say that, you say, wait a minute, let's pull this out. Oh, look here. Muhammad bought, owned, sold, and traded black African slaves, and his followers institutionalized the African slave trade 1,000 years before the United States even existed. What was this? What was this about Islam freeing all the slaves and so on? And even then, I mean, slavery was stopped in Muslim countries like Saudi Arabia because of pressure from Western nations. So it completely destroys, having access to their sources completely destroys their ability to make things up, to get people to convert. And so I just look at all that and it's like, wait a minute, we're told, hey, 2060, it's too late. 2070, it's all too late. Here we are, we're right here. We got this window of a few decades, and here's literally everything you could possibly dream of to wreck this ideology. Here's all their sources, and here's open access to all of them around the world. Do your work or suffer the consequences, because that's on you. But right now we have everything we need to stop Islam from taking over. And so, I look at that and just go, perfect timing here. Perfect timing to get all of this.
Yeah, like it seems like for the better part of the 20th century, Islam was at least in the West, it was an irrelevant concern, other than maybe like little blips like the Nation of Islam, like Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali and things like that, right? But for the most part, it just wasn't really on people's radar. And then all of a sudden, this century, it just sort of explodes. That's not the right pun to use, but yeah, 9/11 happens, right? And then now everybody's like, we're really focused on Islam in a really sort of superficial and kind of clumsy way at first. First with anger, and then with this sort of kind of reactionary tolerance. But now through like immigration, right? So like you talked about how we have this contact point through the internet, but it's also just like everyone in our communities. I think in Canada, like at the turn of the century, there was maybe like 500,000 Muslims in Canada, which would be like, I don't know, somewhere between 1% to 2% of the population, whereas now it's like 5% of the population. And certain neighborhoods in the city I live in, you go to the store and there's people with hijabs everywhere, and they're clearly like from Muslim countries who are getting settled. And it's like that there's kind of a clash of civilizations that's taking place right now. And this is something that's been on my mind recently because, 20 years ago, the thing that apologists were all concerned about, primarily from a theistic perspective, was the new atheism, right? And secularism. And for good reason, right? Like Western civilization has been on this secularizing trajectory for so long that's been fairly poisonous in many respects. But now it's like, secularism will fade away because it's a sterile ideology. It's a sterile culture, right? It leads to self-suicide and sterility, right? It doesn't reproduce itself very well. But now we've got this influx of Islamic people, and it seems like that should be more prominently on our radar as sort of the apologetics kind of enterprise at large. Is that what's really motivating you right now? Would you say that most apologists should be focusing their study on Islam and evangelizing Muslims?
Well, that's one of the reasons I ended up sticking with it, was because I wasn't interested in it. I was more interested in the arguments of atheists, and I was more interested in science and psychology and philosophy and all these things. And, reading about Muhammad in the Hadiths, it's like, half the time you just you need to go take a shower afterwards. And the other time it's like, how is this taken seriously it sounds like it was. You read the Hadiths, it sounds like a religion made up for like 5-year-olds. I mean, everything is like, Satan hides in your nose and Satan is in your ear. And when Satan hears the call to prayer, he farts to cover up the sound. It sounds like it was written for little kids. Everything is like poo poo pee pee, poo poo pee pee and stuff. And Satan peed in your ear. And it's like, oh my goodness, what is this religion? But yeah, it was kind of sitting back and going, wait, Muslims make up like between 1/5 and 1/4 of the world's population, and almost all apologists are focusing on dealing with atheism. And it's like, I mean, shouldn't there be a proportional concern for Islam if you're dealing with that many people out there? And so at first it was just, someone needs to do this. And back then there was not a lot of people dealing with it. Yeah. And the people who did start dealing with it 20 years ago, that sucked. 20 years ago sucked because if you start talking about Islam, you caught it from everyone. Everyone. Muslims start telling you they're gonna kill you and they're gonna do this and that to you. Yeah. Atheists start responding to you, going, look, you're saying my sky daddy better than your sky daddy, you idiot, you dumb religitard. You're religious too. You have no business criticizing some other person. Yeah. But then Christians would say, how dare you criticize Muhammad or the Quran? That's going to hurt their feelings, and they're never going to listen to you if you hurt their feelings about their prophet and their book. So how dare you criticize their religion? You're just driving people away. You're driving Muslims away, and they're never going to like Christians again. You're going to cause all this death and destruction. They're going to get mad because what you said about their prophet. They're going to go kill a bunch of Christians. Look at you. You're causing the deaths of Christians. So it's every direction you just caught it from. So it was really, really bad back then. Yeah. Now it's changed. There are tons of Christians dealing with Islam. So no, I wouldn't say that all apologists should be focusing on Islam. I would say we need a lot of apologists focusing on Islam, and that's what we've got right now. For me, it's more about this information working its way to the popular level, to where people in general, certain things need to become common knowledge. It can't just be, oh, here's something for the apologist to deal with. When the Muslim preacher shows up and he says, hey, you should convert to Islam because what do you guys like here? Oh, we like women's rights. Oh, Muhammad was a champion of women's rights. He's the greatest feminist who ever lived. Just say whatever he thinks people want to hear. If information has gotten to the popular level, then, you want hands to go up and say, wait a minute. You just said, and people to be able to correct him. That's what ultimately stops Islam from spreading.
I find it really hard to actually get to the bottom of what it is that Islam teaches specifically. Like even with, AI, like if you were to search something on AI, like does Islam teach this or that? They seem to take a very sort of, let's say, cautious or even defensive posture towards anything that could sound polemical or critical of Islam. So for example, something like the promise of a harem of virgins, in paradise. Does Islam teach that? Like if you were to ask ChatGPT that, it would say, no, that's a misconception. There are these kinds of things, but some scholars disagree about that and others say this or that. Like, so why is it that it's such a difficult climate to ascertain what it is that Islam specifically teaches?
Well, I mean, keep in mind, like after 9/11, after 9/11, everyone rushed out to show that they weren't Islamophobes, and politicians almost across the board, on the left and on the right, journalists pretty much everywhere, educators, entertainers, everyone had to show that they're not Islamophobes. And so, I mean, what would happen on the news back then? There'd be news of a terrorist attack, and then to show that they're not Islamophobic, these news programs would all get Muslim spokespersons on their show to say, Islam is actually a religion of peace. Islam does not promote terror. Islam does not promote these things. That's why, and then they would give their pitch for Islam. And it was amazing. After every terrorist attack, there would be a spike in conversions, because after every terrorist attack, instead of condemning Islam and looking into the sources and seeing what led to these attacks, people would instead focus on showing that they're not Islamophobes and that they don't hate Muslims. And so how do you do that? Well, you just bring on the Muslim speakers and so on. And everyone's saying how wonderful Islam is and how great Islam is. And then people are watching that going, oh, wow, Islam's really great. And you get this people converting to it and so on. Yeah. So, that was a sad situation for years. But keep in mind, that's all the people who are programming the AI and so on. They grew up in that environment where if you have a problem with Islam, if you think it's a problem with the ideology, if you think there's a problem with Muhammad or the Quran, it's because you're racist and you're an Islamophobe and you're a bigot and you're a hate monger. And so you don't want to be all those things. And so it's basically the same pressure on people now to have warm feelings towards Islam as it was, 20, 25 years ago.
Like as somebody who's working in the apologetic sphere, when people ask me about Christianity, like you probably, and especially in my personal life, right? Like if someone says, hey, tell me about your faith, I'm like, all right, let's have this conversation. I get really excited because I want to share everything that Christianity says and teaches and its history, and often to correct a lot of the misconceptions about it. But I find that like with Islam, it's almost like, it's kind of like Mormonism this way. I remember the first time I sat down with Mormon missionaries who knocked on my door, they started like very strategically showing me the things that they thought I would be receptive to as a Christian, right? Like, hey, we're just Christians too. It's the Church of Jesus Christ, and we believe in the Bible, but we also believe some other things that happen afterwards, like this extra testament. And so they would very sort of cautiously lead you into certain things, while don't look over here, don't look at Joseph Smith and some of the crazy things that he said and did, and don't look at polygamy and whatever else. I find that my encounters with Islam, or even my own personal study of it, feels like that often, right? Like where there's a lot that's kind of being concealed. And I guess you hinted at that. Like, are they conscientious of the fact that there are things within their own system that are in fact bad by their own assessment, or are they just trying to very strategically lead us to those things?
No, they know.
Okay.
The people who actually know Islam, they know. And so that's why they spent many years filtering things out. So what you'll hear from a Muslim is, hey, do you believe in submitting to God? Yeah, I believe in submitting to God. Hey, Islam, that's the meaning of the word Islam. Islam means submission, and it's submission to God. So if you believe in submitting to God, why would you have a problem with Islam? And so we just believe, we believe in one God. And guess what? We believe in Moses, and we believe in Abraham, and we believe in David, and we believe in Jesus. We believe these things. And so what would your problem be? So just accept Islam. It's a religion of pure monotheism. And people are like, wow, the religion of pure monotheism, that makes sense. And Islam is a package deal. It's not just, pure monotheism. It's and all of this stuff. In fact, on the issue of submission, so, hey, Islam means submission to God. Islam doesn't simply tell you that you must submit to God. It tells you how you submit to God. And Surah 4, verse 65 of the Quran says you can have no real faith until you make Muhammad judge in all disputes, find no resistance against any of Muhammad's decisions, and accept everything Muhammad says with full submission. It says full submission. You have to accept everything Muhammad says, have no resistance against it, and accept everything with full submission. So Islam says you submit to God. Okay, how do I submit to God? By submitting to everything Muhammad said. Okay, so it's really the religion of submission to Muhammad, and Muhammad said some pretty crazy, messed up stuff. And yes, there's all sorts of stuff about the virgins you get in paradise, and a man will be able to have sex with 100 virgins a day in paradise. And you think, well, isn't God going to run out of virgins? No, because God restores their virginity. So every time you deflower a virgin, you wake up the next day and she's a virgin again. Allah has reconstructed her hymen and so on so that she's a virgin again. And you spend eternity doing this. And the way they're described, the houris, the virgins, they're described as having budding breasts. So that's Tanner stage 2 in the process of puberty. That's the beginning. That's the first sign of puberty.
Okay.
And so the girls are just starting puberty, and they remain that age forever. And so you spend eternity deflowering virgins, Tanner stage 2.
Is that taught
early
explicitly in the
puberty
Quran?
virgins.
Is that where that comes from?
That right there, that it sometimes gets translated as swelling breasts because that was people, that's people who didn't understand how the word is used. But Muslim commentators pointed out, they're like, it's not swelling breasts, it's budding breasts, and the term that's used is specific. It refers to a stage of development where a girl first starts developing the signs of being a woman. But yeah, the virgins you get in paradise are described that way. It's in the hadith and in the commentaries and so on, where they give a lot more of the details, like being able to deflower 100 virgins a day and so on.
Like, how authoritative are the hadiths? Because the hadiths are written by companions of Muhammad, is that right? Like, it's almost kind of like Hitler's table talk, for example. Like people will often dispute things that are in those table talk texts, but is that what the hadiths are like?
The hadiths, you have different Muslim groups. You have Sunni and Shia, and they'll use different sources and so on. But the hadiths, they have a grading system. So some hadiths are considered more reliable than others. Okay. But no, they're foundational in Islam. Lots of Islamic teachings come from the hadith, not from the Quran. I'm talking basic stuff like praying 5 times a day. The Quran says pray. The Quran only mentions 3 daily prayers. Okay. Muslims pray 5 times a day. Why? That's in the hadith. Okay. The Shahada. So that's how you even become a Muslim. You have in the Quran, there's no God but Allah, but that's not the real Shahada. The real Shahada is there's no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. That comes from the hadith. So like basic Muslim practices come from the hadith, not from the Quran. So the hadith are foundational in Islam. And you can't even understand lots of what the Quran says without knowing what the historical background is from the hadith. So, we understand, and historians understand, they have some serious problems with their methodology. Because in the Muslim mindset, it's, if I have this story and I have this list of names, this guy got it from so-and-so, got it from so-and-so, got it from so-and-so, got it from so-and-so, who ultimately got it from a companion of Muhammad who heard Muhammad say this. And the reasoning is, well, we know you couldn't have made up this story because you've got the list of names. Well, if I can make up a story, I can obviously make up the list of names too, right? That's not some impossible thing to make up. So you have historians. Historians think that the Islamic method of history is a joke, but Muslims take it very seriously. So if you're like an Orthodox Sunni Muslim, which is like 85% of Muslims in the world, they take the hadith very, very seriously.
Are most Muslims fluent in the hadith, or are they kind of ignorant of what it contains?
Your average Muslim's totally ignorant of what's in the hadith and what's in the Quran, except for things that are constantly emphasized and reinforced. So they have like parts of the Quran that they use in their daily prayers. Okay, they're familiar with that. Yeah. And then they're familiar with their basic practices. So they know their prayers, they know to go to the mosque, they know that they have to take the pilgrimage, they know that they're supposed to dress in a certain way. They know their basic practices. And people look at that and say, oh, they know their stuff. They must know what's in their sources. That's what I used to think. I used to think, oh, these guys are obviously very knowledgeable about their religion. Yeah. And then you start having discussions with them and they have no clue what they're talking. They'll say all kinds of things and you start quoting their sources to them. They've never heard it before. And so, and by the way, this actually developed. I mentioned Surah 4, verse 65, that if you don't submit fully to Muhammad, you're not a real Muslim. And if you have any resistance against any of his decisions, you're not a real Muslim. Yeah. Well, I mean, think about that. Muhammad's decisions are not in the Quran. Muhammad's decisions are in the Hadith. The Quran is supposedly Allah's eternal speech. Yeah. It's not coming from Muhammad. Muhammad's decisions and his deeds and so on, those are in the Hadith. So if Muslims are looking to that, all of Muhammad's decisions, well, the Hadiths are these massive multi-volume collections of sources. Like Sahih al-Bukhari is just one of their collections. That's 9 volumes in the English translation. That's 9 volumes. So your average Muslim's not going to know what's in the Hadith, but here's the danger and here's the reasoning behind it. If you're a Muslim and you're just reading the Quran, and in order to understand the Quran, you need to know what's in the commentaries and you need to know what's in the Hadiths, but you haven't read the commentaries and you haven't read the Hadiths, well, guess what? If you're just reading the Quran, you're probably going to get some wrong. You're going to get some things wrong. You're not going to understand what this is about, and you're going to come to a wrong conclusion about what this means, and then you're actually in trouble. And Muhammad in the Hadith said that all innovators go to hell. And innovation in Islam is the sin of bid'ah. It's where you're coming up with your own interpretation or way of doing something. That's a sin that will get you sent to hell. And so if you come up with just your own interpretation and your own way of doing things, and which you're going to do if you do not know what's in these sources and how to interpret things correctly, you're just going to interpret it based on your own ideas. Yeah. Well, you run the risk of going to hell. And so what happened over time in Islam is it became, look, either you need to learn all of this, just become a scholar. Either you learn all of this, you know the Quran, you know the commentaries, you know the Hadith. You either learn all of it, or you sit down, keep your mouth shut, and listen to what your scholars say and obey them. Yeah. And there wasn't much of a middle ground, and so that's how they kind of ended up with your Muslims just not knowing anything about what's in their sources. They only know what they've been told, and that's what you get. And you bring up an issue, and they tell you what they heard, and they don't tell you what's in their sources because they don't know. Yeah. And so, so that's that's a sad situation, but it's actually, for apologetics purposes, it's actually a good situation because that allows us to tell Muslims what their religion actually teaches on some topic. And after this happens over and over again, the Muslim starts realizing, wait a minute, I've been told all my life this thing by my imam. And this Christian is telling me my imam was not telling me the truth, but the Christian is showing me from the Quran and from the Hadith that what this guy was saying was not true. Yeah. And so what eventually happens is they realize they can't trust their imam. They can't just blindly follow what their imam has been saying because they're finding out from a Christian that the imam's not telling the truth. And so they eventually get to a point where a light switch goes off and they go, oh, I need to look into this for myself because I can't just blindly trust what I'm told anymore. I need to look into this for myself. And once they start looking into it for themselves, that's someone who's on their way out of Islam.
Is that pretty typical that it does lead to like an apostasy? Or do you find that people just say, well, if that's what Islam says, then that's what I'm going to believe as well?
Well, you get both reactions.
Yeah,
you get both reactions.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's when people leave Islam, it's usually that. You can follow it. It's you'll just be having these discussions, and they'll say Muhammad's the greatest man who ever lived. And you say, okay, why did he have sex with a 9-year-old girl? Well, he didn't have sex with a 9-year-old girl. That's made up by Islamophobes. Okay, well here's a source. Oh, here's another source. Oh, here's another source. Oh, here's another source. Yeah, but there are all these other sources that say she was way older. Okay, go find me one. Well, I will. I'll come back. They come back. Oh, well, I found an article saying she was. No, I didn't say find me an article written by a Muslim in the 21st century. Show me a source in your sources that say she was older than 9. And then just over time, it's just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and then eventually it's. Oh, okay. You're right about this stuff, and I've been told wrong all my life. And it usually takes like several examples of this happening before they realize, whoa, I can't trust what these guys are saying.
I was going to ask you, like, what advice would you give to somebody interacting with Islam or wanting to engage with it as to what are the key arguments that they should be more familiar with that really are fatal to the Islamic position? It sounds like for you, a lot of it has to do with the life of Muhammad and just sort of laying that out on the table. But are there other sort of key arguments that you would appeal to?
There are two really important areas, and they're important for different reasons. I learned from experience the thing that causes Muslims to doubt their religion most is finding out there are all these problems with Muhammad. And that's combined with them never hearing about these things from their leaders and only hearing about them from Christians or atheists or someone else who's criticizing Muhammad. And then they find out, oh, Muhammad did all this stuff. Wait a minute. My entire belief is based on what this guy says. And he did all this stuff. And no one told me about this stuff until Christians and atheists told me about it.
Yeah.
I wonder why my leaders kept all of this from me when they're telling me how great Muhammad was. And Muhammad did all this stuff that if he did it today, he'd be doing multiple life sentences in prison. So I learned that from experience, and so I just kept going after Muhammad. Eventually, there was a poll. Muhammad Hijab he's a Muslim Dawah guy, but he did a poll for Muslims, and he asked the question, I'm only speaking to you Muslims who doubt your religion from time to time. So they're still Muslims. They haven't left Islam, but sometimes when you have doubts, if you're a Muslim who occasionally doubts his religion, when you doubt your religion, what is causing those doubts? And he gave all these options. And it's, moral problems with Muhammad, weakness of the Muslim community, good arguments for an opposing position, and so on. He gave the list. By far, the number one answer was moral problems with Muhammad. That's what causes Muslims to doubt. So if we know that what causes Muslims to start thinking twice about whether their religion is true, what causes them to start questioning whether their religion is true, if we know that it's moral problems with Muhammad, why in the name of common sense don't we have every Christian on the planet start learning moral problems with Muhammad?
Yeah.
Christians just think it's like mean, it's a mean thing to do or something.
Yeah.
And it's like, wait a minute, this is the most, it was like, what do you care? What do you want to trash their religion for? Okay, they're not taking your gospel presentation seriously if they think they've got the last guy. If they are not doubting that, if they don't have any reason to doubt that this guy's a prophet, why are they going to take anything? Why are they going to be interested in hearing what you have to say? Once their confidence in Muhammad is shaken, then they're, okay, maybe he's not a prophet. Maybe I need to start seeing what's out there. It's just crazy. They've got like the fundamental thing that causes them to start thinking twice about Islam and to start thinking about alternatives to Islam is hearing about all the things, that messed up things their prophet did, and Christians are trained, no, don't ever do that. That will just hurt their feelings, and then they won't listen to you anymore. Weird things, but Christians need to get past that, need to realize we do need to be learning some of these problems, at least a few of them, and be sharing those with Muslims. That's what shakes a Muslim's confidence. So that's the most important thing as far as causing Muslims to doubt their religion and starting them on a path of starting to investigate things for themselves. It's very important for that. But there's this other thing that's probably more important for Christians. And it's one particular argument. We call it the Islamic Dilemma. And that's just because every discussion Christians will ever have with Muslims you will eventually get to the point in the conversation where they say your Bible's been corrupted.
Okay.
So if they're talking about whoever's starting it, if they're trying to preach Islam to you or you're trying to preach the gospel to them, whenever you get to a disagreement, like if you point out, hey, Jesus died on the cross for sins, he rose from the dead, and he's Lord, he's the divine Son of God. If you point that out, well, they have to believe in Jesus in Islam. They have to believe in Jesus. And so if Jesus in the Gospels is saying something different from what Islam teaches, they have to say, your book's been corrupted. That was changed.
Yeah.
And so what's happened is now pretty much every Muslim you talk to is convinced that what the Quran says, again, they haven't read the Quran, they don't know what's in the Quran, but they've been told by their leaders that what the Quran says is, yes, the Torah and the gospel were revealed by Allah, but then Jews and Christians corrupted those scriptures. And so now their scriptures are partly correct. They have some things that are correct and lots of things that are incorrect. How do you know what the correct parts are? Well, the parts that align with Islam. Those are the correct parts. Other stuff has been corrupted. And so Muslims think that's what the Quran says. That's not what the Quran says. That's not what the Quran ever says. The Quran affirms not just the initial inspiration of the Torah and the gospel. The Quran affirms their preservation and their authority right now. If you go to the Quran and say, what does this command Jews to do? The Quran commands Jews to judge by the Torah. The Quran commands Christians to judge by the gospel. The Quran says Jews and Christians have no ground to stand upon if we are not standing upon the Torah and the gospel. The criticism against Jews and Christians in the Quran is not that we corrupted our scriptures. The criticism against Jews and Christians in the Quran is that we don't follow our scriptures, that we misinterpret our scriptures, that we distort our scriptures with our speech. That's the Quran's criticism. It's you guys aren't following your scriptures. Well, why would it be telling us to follow our scriptures if our scriptures have been corrupted? And so once you actually lay out what the Quran really says about the previous scriptures to a Muslim, that Allah revealed those scriptures, that he preserved them, and that they are still authoritative, these are still authorities. Once you realize that, this puts Muslims in a dilemma. This is what we call the Islamic Dilemma. We point out there are only two possibilities here. Either Christians have the inspired, preserved, authoritative Word of God, or we don't. It's one or the other. So either we have the inspired, preserved, authoritative Word of God, or we got something that's corrupted, or something that was never the Word of God, or something else. But it's one or the other.
Yeah.
And so here's the dilemma. If we have the inspired, preserved, authoritative Word of God, Islam is false because Islam contradicts what we have on fundamental doctrines like Jesus' death for sins, his divine nature, and so on. But Islam contradicts what we have on basic doctrines. So if we have the Word of God, Islam is false. The alternative is if we don't have the inspired, preserved, authoritative Word of God, Islam is still false because Islam affirms the inspiration, the preservation, and the authority of our scriptures. So if we have the Word of God, Islam is false. If we don't have the Word of God, Islam is false. Either way, Islam is false. And so it's a situation where, all Christians really need to run this argument is there are dozens of verses in the Quran. So it's a ton of verses affirming our scriptures. But if Christians just learn like 2 or 3 of them to use them in a conversation, then those discussions go completely differently, because the way the discussion goes now, again, whoever's starting it, eventually the Muslim says your scripture's been corrupted. And the natural tendency for a Christian in that situation would be, okay, I need to learn some basic like textual criticism so I can defend the textual preservation of our scriptures and to try that, but not realizing the Muslim's argument has nothing to do with textual criticism. He knows that according to the Quran, your scriptures were inspired, but he knows they don't line up with Islam. So the only conclusion that he can draw is that our scriptures have been corrupted. So it's because of what his religion teaches. That's why he's concluding that your scriptures have been corrupted. Not because he went and studied a bunch of textual criticism. Yeah. So you're responding with something that isn't getting to the heart of what his objection really is. Whereas the Islamic dilemma, it's, oh, wait, you're saying my Bible's been corrupted? You think there's a problem for me. Actually, it's a problem for you because that's not what your book says. Your God and your prophet did not say that. Here's what your God and your prophet actually said. And it's completely different from what the Muslim has heard all of his life. So So again, just the regular, and I'm saying this because that's how I did things,
Yeah.
right? When I'm having discussions with Nabil, we start discussing things. Oh, your book's been corrupted. So we start looking into textual criticism. I'm going, no, look at this. This is considered the best preserved book of the ancient world. Yeah, you have textual variants, but that's what textual criticism is for. If someone makes a mistake or changes something, well, that doesn't change things in other parts of the world. So you can actually line up the manuscripts and you can spot things and you can figure it out and you could get back to what it actually said. And what you never find ever, even with all these textual variants and so on, none of these help Islam. None of it helps Islam. For Islam to be true, you would need like massive corruption of basic doctrines. That's what you need. That's what you never have.
Right.
That's what
Like
you
the
never have in the
resurrection or
manuscript
something
tradition.
like that.
Yeah. You need to get to a gospel that Jesus doesn't die for sins. He doesn't rise from the dead. He's not the Son of God. That's what you'd need. That's what you never find.
Yeah.
And so, but that's how the discussions would go. Nabil would say, "Oh, your book's been corrupted. This has been changed, or something like that." And I start looking through. The textual variants and so on. There's no textual variant that helps you get that and so on.
Yeah.
But that's not the source of his objection, so it doesn't actually help. Put it this way, it did help, but it was over years. It was over years of studying this. And it's like, okay, you can spend years going, learning textual criticism and responding to a Muslim's arguments about a passage. Or you can point out, hey, you're saying my book is corrupted? Oh, well, how do you reconcile that with your God saying in Surah 18:27 that no one can ever change his words? How do you reconcile that with Surah 5, verse 47, commanding Christians to judge by the gospel?
Yeah.
Why would Allah command us to judge by a gospel that's been corrupted if he thought it was corrupted? So you just start going through these passages, and it switches attention over to their position. They want you to sit there trying to refute the claim that the Bible's been corrupted. They get really uncomfortable when you start pointing out it's not what their God and their prophet say. So as far as what Christians, let me put it this way. If 10% of Christians learned a basic version of the Islamic Dilemma, just a few verses, Dawah's done. Dawah's like their version of evangelism.
Yeah.
It would be done.
Yeah.
They can't, all of Dawah is basically, hey, Islam is true, your book's been corrupted. Well, if as soon as they say your book's been corrupted, this flips back and you expose a glaring problem for their religion, namely their God and their prophet affirmed scriptures that completely contradict what they were saying, then all of a sudden they're on the defensive, and it completely shifts everything, and it destroys Dawah.
So Dawah, by the way, is like their word for evangelization. Is that right?
It's an invitation. It's inviting people to Islam. So it's kind of a combination between like evangelism and apologetics. But telling people why they should become Muslims. Yeah. So anyway, those are the two areas Christians should focus on. Apart from, I'm just assuming Christians know that they need to be able to defend what's in the Bible and be able to show from the Bible, the gospel. But as far as what Christians need to know specifically to adapt that for use in Islam, really, really effective to learn some problems with Muhammad, and always helpful to learn the Islamic Dilemma. So if anyone just looks up the Islamic Dilemma, they can find some of the verses that I'm talking about that they can use in discussions, and very, very helpful.
Yeah, that's helpful. It seems like you alluded to there, once they're on the defensive, it starts to collapse a bit because they tend to want to be on the offensive. At least that's what I've seen from debates, and especially you see a lot of clips of dialogues on the street, right? Like you'll have these kiosks with Muslim evangelists or Dawah guys, and they're really going on the offensive, especially against Christianity. And it seems to me that their focal point is often the Trinity itself. Like apparently it's either logically incoherent or self-refuting or whatever. Like they'll say things. I remember seeing one clip where he asked, and these are clever lines of argumentation, but the Dawah guy asked the Christian, like, can God die? Like fundamentally. And he said, well, no, of course not. I mean, he's being itself. And he said, okay, well, did Jesus die? Well, yeah, I guess he did. And is Jesus God? Yeah. Well, so then it's incoherent, right? It's self-refuting. Yep. It seems to me though, like another maybe kind of silver bullet argument, or at least sort of a line of defense. This doesn't prove Christianity is true, but it does seem to me that like, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, but in Islam, like they're voluntarists, aren't they? In that they believe that God can will anything. Like his sovereignty is so absolute that he can even do things that contradict his own nature, presumably. Whereas in Christianity, we don't believe that. But if they're going to say, oh, can God die? No, I guess not. Well, was Jesus God and Jesus died? So how does that work? It seems to me that a pretty simple reply to that is, well, are you saying that God can't do a certain thing? Like, it seems like we can sort of flip the tables on them. Is that actually effective, would you say, or is that even correct?
There are a few things there. So on the issue of you mentioning that they seem to like to be on the attack,
Yeah.
that is correct. And that's kind of built into Christianity and Islam, in that Christians are, we're told to be able to defend
Right.
what we believe, right? That's 1 Peter 3:15.
Yes.
Always be prepared to give a response to anyone who asks you for the hope that you have.
Yeah.
So giving a defense, giving a rational defense of what we believe is built into Christianity. Attacking other positions is built into Islam. The Quran is constantly attacking everyone else's position. And so it feels normal to a Christian to be defending his position. It feels normal to a Muslim to be attacking other position. The Christians, now fortunately this is changing, but Christians, especially if you go back 20 years ago, would get very uncomfortable if you're attacking someone else's position. They get really uncomfortable if you're attacking Islam and pointing out problems with Islam. And isn't that going to be offensive? Isn't that going to hurt people's feelings and so on? So Christians would feel uncomfortable attacking someone else's position, but Muslims get really, really uncomfortable defending their position when you're pointing out problems. So anyway, it's good that we're getting to points where we can flip that and say, no, you guys actually need to defend what you believe here, because we see some problems. And it's awesome for something like the Islamic Dilemma, when it's, we get to attack the Christian. Your book's been corrupted. Oh, actually, if our book's been corrupted, then you got some problems, because your God and your prophets say our book hasn't been corrupted. So what do you do with this? And they don't know what to do. They don't know what to do. And then they start scrambling for responses. But what you just brought up there, yeah, that's one of the classic, that's top five. That's top five of their arguments, that you believe Jesus is God, but you believe Jesus died. God can't die, so Jesus can't be God, that sort of thing. And this is a situation where knowing some things about Islam, it allows you to treat any of these arguments as basically an open door for preaching the gospel. So I'll go ahead and show everyone how to do that on this issue right here. It's actually very simple. So a Muslim says, hey, you Christians believe Jesus is God. You believe that Jesus died on the cross, but God isn't the sort of being that could die. Therefore, you have an incoherent position. And the normal Christian tendency here would be to start explaining like the incarnation. Hey, look, here's John 1:1. In the beginning is the Word is with God, the Word was God, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And so if the Word becomes flesh, then he has a human nature, and a human nature can die. They won't get it. They won't get it. You have to get them to understand the concept first. And you can usually only do that by pointing out something in their religion where they can't object because they're worried about becoming heretics or something like that. You have to show them something from their religion that helps them get the point, and then you go back to like John chapter 1.
Right.
So here in this situation, they say, hey, God isn't the sort of thing that can die, but Jesus died. So how can you believe Jesus is God? Say, okay, let me think about that for a few minutes, and maybe we'll check out a passage. But before that, I have a question. Is the Quran eternal, or does it have a beginning? And if the Muslim happens to say it has a beginning, you're talking to a Muslim who has no clue what he's talking about. Tell him to go ask his imam. But the official view of Islam is that the Quran is the eternal speech of Allah. So the Quran is the eternal speech of Allah. And you say, okay, so the Quran doesn't have a beginning, right? The Quran doesn't have a beginning. That's interesting, because I have a Quran right here, and it says, published in 2008. Now, I don't get it. How can this be eternal if this began in 2008? This was published in 2008. How can you say that the Quran is eternal? And then they say, that's a physical copy of the Quran, and so on. You keep asking questions, though. It's like, can the Quran be destroyed? It's like, no, it's the eternal speech of Allah. It can't be destroyed. Wait a minute, but there are people who burned Qurans. So they've destroyed Qurans, right? But you're saying the Quran can't be destroyed. And your Muslim friend hasn't thought through this. But, in having the discussion, you want to make the point, actually, according to Islamic theology, the Quran has two natures. It's the eternal speech of Allah. And as the eternal speech of Allah, it has no beginning, it has no end, it's not created, it can't be destroyed. But the Quran, to enter our physical world, has to be put into a book form made of paper and glue and ink, or it has to be, they would say, written on people's hearts if you've memorized it.
Okay.
And so once you get through this, once you get them to understand that, you say, aha, now I understand. So as far as the eternal speech of Allah, it's not created, it can't be destroyed, but when the Quran enters our world, it takes on a physical nature made of paper and glue and ink. And since it has a physical nature, now you could say, with respect to its physical nature, it has a beginning. With respect to its physical nature, it can be burned, it can be destroyed. But you wouldn't say that the eternal nature of the Quran has somehow been destroyed, or that the eternal nature of the Quran has had a beginning or something like that. Ah, I get what you're saying now. But now that we've agreed on that, what was your objection to
the incarnation?
God entering creation, taking on a human nature, and then because he had taken on a human nature, now he can experience death. What was your objection to that? If that's incoherent, then I have to reject the Quran, and Islam is an incoherent religion. I can't believe your basic beliefs about the Quran. And then they don't want to object to that, and so at that point it has to become, oh yes, God could enter creation if he wanted to in that fashion, but he just didn't.
Yeah.
And so now you're back to just talking about revelation, which one is revealed from God. And then if you read John 1:1 to them, if you read John 1 to them about the incarnation, you read Philippians 2 or something like that, and they say, no, that's been corrupted. Okay, now you just go Islamic Dilemma. Your book affirms our book. Our book says this.
Yeah.
So what do we do here?
Yeah, that's interesting. So with this current kind of clash of civilizations between, especially with the immigration issue, how do you see this all playing out? Do you think that we're looking at a whole new demographic of people who are ripe for conversion to Christianity? Do you think that will actually happen, or something else?
Well, it is happening. There are lots of Muslims who are converting. I mean, I hear from people from like Afghanistan and Bangladesh and so all the time. It's like certain areas where the conversions are just going through the roof. With that said, that's with not a lot of people working on this. I mean, think if Christians in general were learning how to defend the gospel with apologetics, learning how to respond to Islam with polemics and so on. I mean, this would be like the greatest time in history for winning Muslims to Christ. And it's like, I mean, we're commanded to go into all the world and make disciples of all nations. And here we are, and all nations are coming to us. And it's like, how do you not look at this as this golden opportunity for reaching Muslims? And again, it's seeing tons and tons of conversions, but my goodness, if Christians just learn the Islamic Dilemma, learn some problems with Muhammad, learn to defend the gospel, I mean, we'd be seeing more Muslims come to Christ than every other generation combined right now.
I mean, part of the challenge is that the age of postmodern Christians, we're not the most impressive Christians that have existed throughout history, where there's problems with our own lack of understanding of our faith and even sort of our own motivation. There's a real sort of spiritual lethargy that exists within our culture. So, I mean, if I could add anything to that, I would say that we Christians need to get much more serious about practicing our faith, about prayer and fasting, and making sure that we are ready for that mission that is being set before us. And it really does feel like that's happening in some ways, right? Like there's the younger generation, the Christians that we're seeing among them are serious and impressive, right? Like there was a time, for like I look at my parents' generation, when to be a Christian, there was some prestige still attached to it. And so you could have motivations to be a church-going person that had nothing to do with actual supernatural faith. But that prestige is all gone now. The only reason you'd be a Christian today is if you really, really believe it. And so yeah, it's encouraging to see some of the young people that are coming up. But yeah, I fully agree with your assessment that this is an opportune time to start to look to that harvest, so to speak, as being really ready to be worked within. How can people continue to follow you and what you're up to these days?
Yeah, I work with a bunch of other apologists on YouTube and so on. But
Okay.
the main channel I post on now is Apologetics Roadshow. But yeah, I post videos, we do live streams and so on, and lots of other. Again, people don't realize how awesome it is right now. It was kind of a lonely world, even like 15 years ago and so on.
Yeah.
But now you got tons of Christian apologists who are dealing with Psalms. God Logic's doing awesome stuff. Inspiring Philosophy is tons of channels out there. For people to learn from, and lots of Christians are. I was just pointing out that last time I was in the airport, I messaged Avery GodLogic that I went up to grab a coffee at Starbucks, and the barista there he says, hey, I watch you in GodLogic, and then he wanted a picture and so on, so we took a picture, and then I was walking back to the gate. This was only a couple minutes later, and a guy was walking through the airport, and he looks over at me, and I'm there with Inspiring Philosophy, and he goes, hey, I watch you too, and I'm listening to GodLogic right now. And he pulls out his phone to show us that GodLogic's on his phone. So I messaged GodLogic, and I'm like, hey, two people within 5 minutes of each other told me that they watch your stuff. And this guy was interesting because this is what he does. He works at the airport, so he walks around, and as he's doing it, he's learning apologetics. And I mean, just think, there are lots of Christians who are learning apologetics right now, because now you have a lot of apologists putting content out there, and you have Christians who are learning this stuff. And so these are actually this all has the potential to be really, really, really awesome time.
And I mean, simultaneously, do you run into Muslims in person who have been listening to your stuff for positive or negative feedback?
Occasionally, it's way more frequent to run into people who are fans and who are learning this stuff. In fact, one day I went to the gym, and I walked in to the locker room, grabbed my stuff, and I was walking out, and the guy it was a kid, not a kid, like maybe 18 or 19.
Okay.
He's walking into the locker room while I'm walking out of the locker room, and he walks in, and he goes just like this. He's walking forward, and he goes, I'm watching you right now. And he shows me on the phone and stuff. But I mean, think about that. It's just random people in like Walmart and McDonald's and all these places. And they're all learning apologetics on YouTube right now. So
yeah, I once had an Orthodox priest approach me in a McDonald's, and it was right after I had done a video on Eastern Orthodoxy. And so I was a little bit apprehensive, but he was like, no, I thought it was really good, and I want to talk to you and learn more about you. And it was a really good exchange. So yeah, it's fun to have those experiences. But yeah, I think we've covered a lot of ground, and I had so much more I wanted to discuss. So I hope we can actually do this again and talk more about sort of like apologetics and the approach, what makes for effective apologetics, and especially in this age of ecumenism. I think that's a really important topic. But we'll leave it for today. But thank you so much, David Wood. This was a lot of fun.
Yep, sure.
Okay, thanks for watching that. I hope that was a blessing to you, that it encouraged you and edified you in your journey with the Lord. And if it did, and if you want to support the work that we're doing as a result, which thank you so much for considering that, because we really do need your help to make this viable. Then there's a few ways you can do that. You can go to brianholdsworth.ca/help, which is obviously my website. And there's some options there. One is to just contribute through my website. The other would be to join us over on Locals, where you can interact with me and other like-minded people. You can gain access to exclusive content, where we're doing live streams and I'm uploading videos and things like that. But we're also doing a secret philosophy study with a secret philosopher academic who's joining us once a month to take us through difficult texts that we want to read on our own, but we need some clarification and some guidance on that. So right now we're working through some works by St. Thomas Aquinas with him, and he's a Thomistic philosopher. So if that's interesting to you, join me on brianholdsworth.locals.com. And again, you can check out my website at brianholdsworth.ca/help.